Welcome to this week's episode of Dreaming Tech, the joint session between Synagogue Tech and Dreaming Up 5781, where you can ask questions about how to move forward in this wonderful world of hybrid, or as I believe the reform movement in America is now calling it, multi-delivery services.
Multi-access.
Multi-access services, an interesting and different way of calling it. Why multi-access, Tobias? What's your view?
Well, what the article that got this going was saying that hybrid, you're focused on the technology. Multi-access, you're focused on the participant. The participant is accessing in a variety of ways. They're not a hybrid person. And so multi-access can also mean not just getting it right on Zoom or in person, but all the accessibility issues too that come in either space. So multi-access was the way to go.
And I should introduce you. So my name is Leo Mindell. I am one of the panelists today. Along with me on this panel today, we have Tobias Moss. Tobias, where are you from? And introduce yourself, because it's a while since you've been on a panel.
Sure. I'm Tobias Moss. I'm over here in Minneapolis, Minnesota at Temple Israel, a Reform synagogue here.
And also we have on the panel today, we have Richard Wolff. Richard, if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening, I'm Richard Wolff. I'm from Southgate North London Reform Synagogue up in Whetstone, North London.
And as always, Tobias, can you throw me co-host? But also, as always, anybody else who would like to join the panel, please raise your hand as we move on to Yuval.
I'm Yuval Karen, the rabbi of Southgate Progressive Synagogue in North London, not very far from Richard's.
Near neighbours, competitors, how would you call it?
Neighbours. It's definitely not competitors.
Not competitors.
We've been doing quite a lot of things together in the past.
And hopefully we'll continue to do so in the future.
Absolutely.
And also joining us on the panel today, we have Carmi. Carmi, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Carmi Weinzweig. I am currently in Redondo Beach, California, and work with a synagogue here, as well as one near my other house in Orlando, and then one in the Chicago area.
Thank you. So you've got a number of people with lots and lots of different opportunities to talk about the issues and things that we have. As always, our questions that we ask are coming in from Slido. So we've got a number of questions already building up in Slido, and we also have today we have an interesting presentation from Yuval. But I wonder if before we get onto Yuval's presentation, to just start off, if we can take a couple of these questions. And have a look at this. So I've got to bring up, it always helps to bring up the window. Sorry, I had a live event, one of those in-person things with people today. And it takes a bit of getting used to meet and greet people.
Was it single access or multi-access?
It was actually multi-access. We had 30 odd people in the room for a launch of a book called When They Came From Me. A book about a person who got arrested during apartheid, put in prison, and then thrown out of South Africa. Very, very interesting book. But we had 10, 15 times the number of people watching on Zoom. Phenomenal experience to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, questions. First one that we're going to come into here, and for everybody, please put your questions in using that the QR code on the left-hand side of your screen that you can see, and then you can vote on the questions that are already in there. So the first question we're going to take is we're going to take the one from Tobias Moss. A synagogue with a good budget, ready to make large purchase installation for a 1,000-seat sanctuary. Panelists have an opinion on vMix versus TriCaster versus an A10. So, hardware, software, or somewhere in between? Carmi.
So I would stay away from TriCaster. There are lots of good arguments for vMix or the Mac equivalent of that, or an ATEM, but just experience with the TriCaster is intermittent. As my experience with the TriCaster, and most of the stuff from NewTek is intermittent. It works most of the time, and that seems to be their focus on getting it to work most of the time. But the other two are much more solid and much more reliable.
So my view is that the TriCaster, I would agree that I'd put the TriCaster at the bottom of that three choices. The reason is that the market has leapfrogged to where they were. And the big thing is, the big question is, do you go for hardware switching or do you go for software switching? Hardware switching, pros, very reliable. You put the work for the switching into the switch. And the problem with a computer on the reverse is that it's really easy to just add one more thing on top of that computer and what it's doing, and it pops over. So you really need to work out that you can't just do, if you're going to have vMix, you need to push off certain other things into other areas. Downside of the hardware switching at the moment for things like the ATEM and for others is there's no NDI support. So the hardware switches require direct in. The upside is this hardware support. And if you can have this discussion 100 ways of who thinks which is more reliable. If you listen to the guys on office hours, everybody is using NDI, but the ones who are doing big productions are doing it all using SDI because it's more reliable than NDI when you start scaling up. Tobias?
I think a part of the question for me and my crew is how easy the different options are to train the average synagogue staff member or volunteer versus just do either option require a real in-house media person?
That is a really, I've seen a lot on that. And I would say that ultimately there is nothing, with an ATEM or something similar, when you're presented with 4 or 8 buttons which resemble 4 or 8 cameras, you press. The same if you go with a joystick, you can move the joystick to the relevant camera position, you can press it. There is something about that. But the power and flexibility comes out when you start going into the software sides. Carmi?
My option for my argument in favor for training purposes in favor of a hardware option like the ATEM is you don't have the wrong software come up at the wrong time. The problem with using a Mac or Windows machine for this is that somebody's using it beforehand and they ran something else, and so the vMix doesn't come up, or it comes up and the window's hidden, or something happens. The downside of the ATEM is it's got 8 inputs and 8 buttons for switching to those inputs, but they're always in the same place. You never have to worry that the window moved or something else happened, or there was a Windows update just before you started high holiday services, or 5 minutes before Kol Nidre something happened. That won't happen with hardware. It's again, there's a downside to it, which is it is what you get. Like there's nothing, you're not going to 6 months from now be able to say, oh God, we wish we had 9 inputs instead of 8, right? You might be able to make that work with a vMix system. And just to follow up on what Leo said earlier, another advantage to some people of the ATEM is it doesn't have NDI support. So
yeah,
there are those who think that's an advantage, not a disadvantage.
So there's also, once you get into the ATEM hardware and you start using it, there's other things you can do. So I'm running an ATEM Mini here, and where Richard has got a logo up here on his screen, I can actually put a logo up on my screen on there. You can do this all in the ATEM. You can draw anything you like on here. You can bring in other stuff in here. So you can put in lower thirds, which is the graphics that you normally see across the bottom here. You can do all of these things now in an ATEM, which you can't, it does take a bit of time to get used to, but it is something that you can do, which a lot of people who move to the software side look at doing that rather than doing it in the ATEM. But I'm running an ATEM Mini here. The shoot that I did earlier, Tobias, when I was in there, was an ATEM Mini Extreme, 8 ways. It's also really nice that I recorded all 8 we had 4 cameras. We recorded all of them with ISOs, which means that ISO, you see that sometimes, it means isolated recording, and it gives us if we want to edit afterwards. One last comeback on this.
Just one other quick thing that based on something that's also really interesting for some events where, especially since you mentioned the ISO recording, one of the really nice things about the Blackmagic solution, and if you're looking at the Blackmagic solution, I would also look at using Blackmagic cameras. There are a couple of different options for it, depending. There's smaller and bigger ones that you can use. But one of the nice things about it is it will generate an edit list for the event at the end, so that you can have somebody go into Resolve with those recordings and produce an edited version of it, where you start out with everything that was already done, and you can trim or you can make it shorter, but you can post a version. Again, it might not be as important for, say, a service, but it would be really nice if you were doing a seminar or you were doing something else, you were doing classes or something. Might be nice to be able to post edited versions, trimmed down onto as a thing afterwards, and that's a really big advantage of it.
Kami, an edited, trimmed down version of a sermon always sounds attractive to me. We actually had we had one question come in from Robert here, or one comment from Robert when you were just saying. He said, "I've had terrible problems with the ATEM Mini Pro used as a webcam into Zoom client. More often than not, some internal buffer somewhere will go full, resulting in extremely static pictures and a full stop, only resolved after disconnecting the ATEM and reconnecting again." Comments on that from anybody?
That sounds like that might be a hardware issue that you might want to contact Blackmagic. We do that a lot, and I've never ever seen that problem. Yeah,
I've seen that when you've overloaded the USB buffers on a machine. The USB buffers, there's only so many USB buses on a PC, depending on what you've got plugged in. Depending on how you plug that in, the ATEM Mini will support USB-C. It won't support. It's not a Thunderbolt connection. It is USB-C. Check what you've got coming in and how you bring it in. I am bringing my picture in from an ATEM Mini. Okay, moving on. Thank you for that question, Chad Lafarge. What can you do to increase interaction in the stream and improve engagement with the virtual audience in a hybrid service? Richard.
Hi, so there's a number of things you can do. One of the things is to actively welcome everybody. Make a point of not just saying hello to the Zoom people on your Zoom, but say hello to the people. Try and make sure, recognize the fact you've got multiple streams going on, and that really helps. And we find little things like we open up the chat, and when we're doing the morning prayers and ask people what they're grateful for, you get everybody to go and put it in the chat, and people don't see the bit behind the scenes where you put it from the different platforms and you feed it to the service leader, but doing things like that actually help the interaction. And we also do chat rounds at the end just for the people on Zoom. We can't do it on the Facebook side because you can't be interactive. But anybody on the Zoom, once we close all the streams down, we let everybody sort of have a managed chat with each other.
What I really used to like with you, Rich, but I think you've stopped doing it, is you used to do your Adon Olam at the end, and you used to go round and just spotlight people as they were singing. Am I right?
Yes, we were doing that. We were doing that more than part. And then our friendly GDPR people sort of got hold of us and said, do we need to go and get consent from everybody to go and do that? And sometimes, those of you in the States, GDPR is all about data protection and all that, and privacy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And sometimes you just don't have the, you have to pick your battles, and sometimes you just haven't got the energy to go into the battle.
I'd argue with that one now, with the fact that Zoom tells you as you log in that it's being recorded, and it tells you that it's being live streamed. Effectively, it's either, do you want to be live streamed and recorded, or do you want to leave? So
we do it on bits and pieces still. We haven't done it on our Dunlum for ages. Maybe we'll put it on our list, and we might start doing it again due to popular request.
Popular request. Yuval.
So we have very similar issues, and the way that we're trying to get as much participation is I know that we can't sing together. That is impossible. But what we can do, and we discovered that, for example, when we read the Psalms and we read them responsively, I invite the people who are with me in the synagogue to recite the first line with me, and the people on Zoom to respond. And that works. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to mix the mitzvot, so that there are some people who are going to do it in the synagogue. They're being called up, coming to the bima and so on. But some people who will be reading, having the mitzvot from home. So trying to keep the mix as much as possible. We're also trying to have the space at the beginning and the end for people to chat with one another. That's a little bit more challenging, especially because COVID time, we want people to be out of the building as soon as possible. So that's a bit of a balance to do. The other thing that we're doing is we're actually not streaming every service. We have two weekends in a month where we're not streaming the services, and therefore people can participate without any fear of being on a screen and so on.
You're still doing them in Zoom, but you're not streaming them, right?
Yeah,
am I reading that
yes,
correct? Yes.
So there is we're not recording. There is no GDPR issue. There are no security issues. We've just decided that this is the best way of welcoming people who might otherwise feel that they don't want to be appearing, even by accident, on camera.
So I think this is actually a really good point, or a good time to probably move over to you, Yuval, to give us your presentation on where and how you've got to where you are today, and we'll come back to the questions afterwards. So for everybody who's watching, remember you can put in the questions on Slido. We've got other questions to come in. Please put them in using the QR code, or you can enter them in the chat. We don't mind, however you want to give us the questions. We prefer them in Slido, but we don't mind. If anybody, as I said before, on the attendees who still wanted to join on the panel, let us know. Otherwise, we will see you. We'll carry this discussion on with everybody after Yuval's presentation.
So I'm going to actually start with the story of how we got to where we got to, and then I will show you a little clip that we've made a couple of weeks ago. We started with no streaming at all. This is something that I've been thinking about, but not really executing. There were issues to do with security that stopped us, but also nobody was willing to take the project. So it was a project that was somewhere in my to-do list for years. I think about 6 or 7 years. I knew one day I will do it, but nobody to do it. The pandemic really threw us into the deep in that respect, that we had to do something. Suddenly, one day, I was at home. So what did I do? My first response was to stream from my laptop. In fact, it was some kind of an old computer that I had, and I used the microphone from the computer, and of course, that was not the best quality in the world. It didn't take very long for the system to fall apart. Then I started using, and I will talk about Intel NUCs later. So I took this very small computer. This is something I can show you. This is the size of the computer. I started using that with the camera, and I used the microphone from the camera using Zoom, a lot of trial and error in the early days. And then I noticed that every once in a while, the computer started freezing and it wasn't responsive. I realized that it wasn't enough to provide the oomph. The GPU was not up to it. So I upgraded the computer and I started using a slightly better microphone as well. And then I got to the point where I started using Stream Deck. Well, I will talk about it in the video. And then came the big shock of moving everything to the synagogue. And for a while, I had a pile of technology in the middle of the synagogue and me in front of it with a sound card connected to it and a microphone, and everything was in a bit of it worked. But it was a temporary arrangement. Then we made a plan to actually put more fixed equipment in the synagogue. And our choice, and we could talk about it after, our choice was going for NDI cameras. When I say our choice, it was really my choice. I know I had a lot of discussions with Leo about NDI and SDI, and I fell in love with the idea of having one cable going to the camera, giving video and data and power. And then obviously you can move the devices much easier when you do that. So we went for NDI. As I don't know anything else, that I don't look back. It works for us and it's fine. So we purchased 2 PTZ cameras. And our solution, what I wanted to do is to have something that will look to the Torah. This is, again, something that for 5-6 years I've been thinking about. We have the Hagbah in the synagogue where you pick up the scroll and you raise it and you show it to everybody so that everybody see what you've actually read. Wouldn't it be fantastic if people could actually follow as I read? So that was my idea. And we put a small webcam on the lectern. It wasn't quite the right resolution that I wanted. It didn't show the text I wanted, the way I wanted it to show. So my idea was to get another PTZ camera to look above the Torah and actually show the text much clearer. And this was our last purchase. We installed it, and now we can actually look at the text in a much clearer way. So there was a question about the future, but I'm going to talk about it after the film. I'm going to show you with all our equipment in place. Welcome to Southgate Progressive Synagogue. But I like to take you through just a tour of the synagogue and the equipment we have in the synagogue. So this is one of the cameras now pointing. It sits at the back of the synagogue and it is pointing towards the front. Here I am. And you can see some of the equipment, mainly the screens that are in front of me. And I will show you in a minute what I have actually on my desk. So let's go and have a look at my desk. So what do I have on my desk? So first of all, I have one small iPad where I control the sound, and I can switch on and off microphones from here. I can up the volume and down the volume. I'm trying not to touch it too much during the service, but if necessary, I can control it. There is that sound system can be also controlled from the service desk, which we'll get to in a minute. But I'm the one who's controlling it from here. Another device is a little laptop that I use mainly to see exactly what everybody else sees on Zoom. It's another device for Zoom only and for me to watch. There is another one on the service desk as well. Then I have a keyboard which I use to control the screens. I don't use it very often. This is really just for emergency or for when I need to tweak a few things. Mostly it is the volunteers on the service desk who will actually perform that task. Another thing is I use my phone, and I actually use my phone as another camera, which I will show you in a minute. I don't use it very often, but sometimes I need it, and I do use it as a camera. Most important device on my desk is something called Stream Deck. The most important thing about it is that this is one way of annoying the volunteers on the service desk, because many of the things that it can do can also be done from the service desk. So again, very useful. I can mute and unmute people, control the Zoom, and control the cameras. So very important device, and saves me a lot of time and hassle. So in front of the service leader, there are two screens where they can see the people on Zoom, but also the PowerPoint presentation. So there's another thing it's a feedback for the service leader. Sometimes I control it from here, but often it is just controlled by the service desk, but at least I know what is happening. Another very important screen is the screen that we have in front of the congregation. And this one is large enough for everybody to see. There will be people here are able to see who is on Zoom, but also when we have the text like the Torah, Haftarah, or readings from the prophets, they're able to follow it on the screen. So the sound system is made, I have a lapel microphone on me, and there is another microphone on each of the lecterns, basically as we had before. This time these microphones are connected to the streaming system as well, not just to the sound system in the synagogue. The organist connected to the sound system, and they have their own microphones, and as necessary we can connect even more microphones. All these are controlled through a very complex sound system or mixer, and you can see so this is the sound mixer, sits inside of the cupboard, and you can see that it doesn't actually have any screens or interfaces or any buttons, because everything is controlled through my little iPad, which we saw, and through the computer, and we can connect as many devices as we can. It does a very complex job, but it's hidden away, and it does it very silently, while enabling us to make sure that we have the sound from the synagogue directed to Zoom or anywhere else that we want. So another thing we have is the service desk. There are volunteers that sit here during services and any special occasions that we have from the synagogue. You can see they have 3 screens, because they actually they do quite a lot. If it is controlling the PowerPoint presentations or Zoom and the streaming software as well, the sound system, that is the streaming software. And here we have the sound system, and also a notification system where I sometimes desperately trying to get to the service desk to tell them to operate something. Another very small device is a small screen, which is used basically as another Zoom screen, so that the service desk can see exactly what is happening in Zoom, so they can see what you can see. But it does another little trick, which is basically it turns the signal into high definition. So that means you can see everything you see from the synagogue is in a higher definition. If we haven't used that device, then it will be in a lower definition. So the next things are the cameras, and these are really the pride and joy of the place. They're very expensive cameras, and they are what's called PTZ cameras, pan, tilt, and zoom cameras. And as their name implies, we can remotely change their position, zoom on things, and that means that they can help us a lot in terms of what we want to highlight in the service. Another camera is on the side wall, on the outer wall of the synagogue. This one is normally we use for either for the lecterns or for the organist, or sometimes to highlight something in the congregation. So that camera number 2. Camera number 3, which is actually the camera, the piece of equipment that we installed last, and it is really completing the set. And this is another PTZ camera. This one is right above the bimah, and it looks down so that you can see what the lectern can see. There you go. So this is one of our Torahs, and we're going to see if we can zoom and see the text of the Torah up close. And there we go, and that is ולכל היד החזקה ולכל המורא הגדול אשר עשה משה לעיני כל ישראל. You see how clear the text is. So we're looking forward to using it in our services.
Fantastic.
It's really good.
So,
I think before we go on to the next bits, I think there's quite a few questions, both I think from people around the panel. I'd like to really ask people around the panel to ask you some questions, and if anybody else wants to ask questions who are watching, please put them into Zoom or put them into Slido. Just point your phone at that square on the left-hand side, and you can put in a question straight to Yuval. Who's got a question first for Yuval? Tobias, I'll start with you. I've got a couple. Go away, fire away.
That was a great presentation, and but I'm sure you have dreams of how it could be even better. If you could add one more camera, where would you put it, and what shots are you trying to capture?
This is really difficult because I already added the camera that I wanted and I dreamt about for some time. So I feel as if we are complete, but maybe not so. I think that the one camera I would put is actually a small camera, and that will be to enable us to actually interact with the service desk. So sometimes people will sit there, could be reading or interacting through Zoom and so on. So we don't have anything at the moment that points at them. We could use the Torah cam to look at them, but I think it would be nicer if we had something else. Otherwise, for the moment, and until we are returning to the synagogue more fully, I think we're okay. We have enough cameras.
So my question that I had for you, Yuval, your pulpit desk looks super, super technically busy. Does that, where do you see that going? In particular, what do you see for like a visiting rabbi? How are they going to deal with that? Right.
So most of the things that happen on my desk can happen on the technical desk, on the service desk. There is nothing that cannot be done from the service desk, and therefore a visiting rabbi will just have to sit there or stand there and do what they need to do without actually having to press buttons and have control. I want more control, and also I recognize some volunteers are very proficient. They know what they're doing and they're doing it well. In that case, I let them do what they need to do. Sometimes I need to intervene if somebody is not familiar with. So there is nothing that the service desk cannot do, with the one exception, and that is the laptop that has the Zoom, but that can easily be set up with somebody at the beginning of the service and just left
there. Joanne.
So in the picture of your laptop, it didn't seem that you had any connections to it. Was there something that went out of the picture and underneath your pulpit?
No, it's wireless. I know a lot of people here don't believe in wireless.
Oh my goodness! What about power? What if you need power?
Don't forget, this is not production. Oh no, there was a cable. There was a cable. Maybe it was white, but there is power cable. That's for sure. But otherwise, it's wireless, and because all it does is gives me feedback from Zoom. then it does.
Okay.
It's not connected to production. It's just another device. It's actually quite an unsophisticated, low power device that I'm using. And the only thing I need to see is what is happening. It helps, because what happens is, what we discovered is, as we look at the different screens, sometimes things disappear and we don't see exactly what everybody else sees. So to mitigate that, we have the feedback, which is Zoom only, and they are all wireless.
So you also asked
Speaking
another.
of Zoom,
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm
So
sorry,
go,
Leo, just quick
Joanne.
follow-up.
Fine. Yeah,
There's a
please.
65 inch on a cart. So do you roll the cart out in front of the congregation? And can they and from the back, can they really see that 65 inch? It didn't look like it was maybe taller than a person.
Right. So for the 5 people we currently have in the synagogue,
They can see it. Okay.
we don't know. We have a capacity of 15 at the moment. So as you know, because of COVID regulations.
Sure.
I think so. I haven't spoken about the future, and this is really one of the things that I'm thinking about. It's not more cameras, but more screens.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have more screens. At the moment, that screen is good enough.
Right.
I have to say that was a very low cost screen. It cost us less than £500, which is, quite good value. It does the job. It's 4K. It's everything. And it basically, at the moment, it's more than enough. I would love to have at least one more screen on the other side, so that there will be enough visibility. But at the moment, it does the job.
So they see the Zoom squares on that 65 inch. Are they hearing what people are saying on Zoom? And is that
Yes.
coming out of the TV, or is that coming out of the sound system?
Not coming out of the television. It's actually coming out of. So the mixer you saw, it's XR RX
18 or
80.
16 or something.
That's it. And everything is connected, including, so it's connected to the computer, and it's connected to our PA system.
Okay.
So everything is conveyed, my voice and the voice of people who are speaking on Zoom, because they're doing mitzvot on Zoom. So everything is conveyed through that. We don't tend to have the little boxes until we get to the Kiddush or other times. All other times, it's basically we spotlight the people who speak. So they will appear large on the screen.
Right.
We share the text, so the text appears large on the screen. It's not perfect. And I tell you, one of the things I want to change, that will happen in the future. At the moment, because we convey, basically Zoom appears there, then when I speak, I also speak on the screen, but there is a delay. And I always see that there is a bit of a competition between me on the screen and me on live, and the screen one wins.
Oh yeah.
So I'd love to change that. I'd like to just not have me on the screen, but when somebody speaks on Zoom, they should be on the screen.
The screens that you show around the sanctuary, Yuval, are they running from the same computer that you are broadcasting Zoom out of?
Everything is running from the same computer. The computer, I have the computer here, and
hold on. We'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
There's a reason why you can actually say in Zoom to say, "Don't show my view."
Okay, that's interesting.
So if you say, "Don't show my view," you will never appear back in the room.
I've learned something.
Tobias, come in there.
And so will that then show the last spotlit person, or will it default back to a gallery?
To my understanding, it says to the last spotlit person or the gallery. There is an option to say, "Don't show my view" in there. Or it may be that "Don't show my view" in gallery. I've got to have a check on that.
Yeah, hide self-view is what it's called.
Sorry?
It's called hide self-view.
Hide self-view. Have a look for that and see if it works. It may work, it may not work.
Okay, it's good to try. I have ideas. I actually have some ideas, but it will come at some point. As for the computer itself,
hold on, we've got lots more questions for you still.
Right.
We're going to come on to that in a minute. So there's a lot more questions there we've talked about. First one I had was about your camera locations. Now, I remember when you started, you had two camera locations because there's two pillars in your sanctuary, one either side, and you started with one camera on one pillar, one camera on the other. What did you find are the problems with that, and how did you solve it?
I don't think there were problems as such. We found that, first of all, that the views were not that different. They were basically showing the same things, but also some of for example, the congregations, we couldn't show the whole congregation with these cameras. And then we decided to make it a little bit more interesting. That's one of the reasons we put one of the cameras at the back. And that camera is times 30. It's fantastic. It can show my face from, I think, about 20 meters away. So we put that one at the back, and that camera is doing quite a lot. We put one camera on the side, and that gives us a side view of me or the other lectern or the organist. So more interesting view. These were the reasons, and I feel these are not the final destinations of these cameras, but at the moment they're doing the work, and it's fine.
So we've got some other questions in here that I'm just going to come to. What the first one was, Joanna here. Do you want to ask your question out on that you put in there?
The one I put in Slido?
Yes, please.
Does the service desk face the congregation, and are you okay with that? Because it seems like they're right in front of you.
No, they're not. They're sitting at the back.
Oh, okay. I saw it
exactly with their congregations, with their backs to the service desk. I see them. I have eye contact with them, but the congregation don't.
Okay. Good. That's it.
So there's a question coming in from Stephen Raben. What was the budget for the equipment and the installation?
So I started with saying we need maybe £1,000, something like that to begin with. But by the time, so this was in March when we only started, and we didn't know, and at some point I sat down and I've made some plans, and actually it helped. I spoke to Leo and I spoke to other people, and by the time I made a proper plan, which I stuck to, it was £10,000. And I have to say, a lot of the work we've done ourselves, but I would say we spent until now around £12,000, £13,000. I'm very aware that other synagogues probably spent a lot more, but we kept it, simple, and we kept it within the budget that we could. I'm doing for the future, and one of the things I'm trying to do is to establish, like anything else in the synagogue, it needs to have a budget so that we maintain, we upgrade, we make sure that the system works. We're in there for the long haul.
Great, thank you. Tobias?
If you could, would you push the service desk into an adjunct space, a video room or whatever? Or is there too much loss of communication? Do you not mind the aesthetic of having them there?
So to begin with, part of the problem I had, especially when we have the new, like people who are being trained, the volunteers being trained, there was a lot of chit chat there, and that was a little bit disturbing. I think, but normally there is no disturbance. They know to be quiet. What we do is we actually use Discord to communicate. So on that little laptop, flimsy laptop that I have, I also have Discord, and I send messages and they send me back. Of course, I'm limited. I can't. It's one of the things, I'm leading a service as well, and I need to give attention to that. But every once in a while, I will say to somebody, you forgot to spotlight, or please do this or do that, or they will send me messages. And people at home, some of the people who are volunteers from home also have Discord, and that's how we all communicate. On the whole, it's actually not a problem anymore.
Just a quick follow up on that. See, we talked about last week about volunteers and how many volunteers you need to run your services and how many are involved in the team. Yuval, how many are involved in how many have been involved in the team in total, and how many typically get involved per service?
Right. So I think we at the moment have 6 volunteers that sit on the machine. So that means that they come and operate the equipment, and they have a rota. Apart from them, there is another volunteer that actually is doing the spotlighting, and they're doing it from home. So the volunteers that man the equipment don't do the spotlighting. It's somebody from home. So per service, we have one volunteer that operates the equipment, and another one that does the spotlighting.
Great. Was there a follow-up there? Sorry, for somebody.
I was just going to ask, did you encounter, when you were trying to develop this model, any organizational resistance, either from getting volunteers or actually trying to go and get to where you needed to go with it?
No, I have to say this has been easy.
That's unusual.
I think I'm saying that because there are the people who do it are already people who like technology, involved in technology, interested, and they did it quite willingly, and I feel very fortunate. Those who are not, did not get involved. The person who does the people who do the spotlighting, they don't necessarily need to be very technical, because it's, once you know how to do it, it's easy. But no, there was no resistance. The only resistance I had was not for the operating of the equipment as much as it was for security concerns, and there I had. We did have resistance, and that's one of the reasons why we dropped the streaming out to basically 2 services in a month, or not 2 weekends in a month.
I think we'll carry on with the questions in a minute. This is really a good point for us. I think it's a good time for us to, Yuval, for you to cover the second section you wanted to cover.
Right. So the second section is actually dealing, I think, with the Nook Computers. Just to say that Nook is next unit of computing. I think that's the meaning of it. And basically, there are devices made by Intel. I have no shares, but I wish I did, because I've been buying the PCs for some time. I think I started with the 4th generation, and it is now on to the 11th generation, and I pretty much have most generations, more or less. And when I say me, it's me and my family. And the good thing about them is that they're very small form factor. In fact, you probably didn't notice the computer that sat on the desk. It was actually on the desk, but it's so small that you wouldn't be able to see it. So I'm going to show you a couple of computers that I have here, if I can get my my technology to work for me. There you go. So this is one I already showed you. It's very small. I think this is a 5th generation, and this computer.
We're not seeing anything yet.
Oh, hold on. There we go. Now.
Good.
That's the 5th generation. You can see that it says do not turn off, because that computer spent some time in the synagogue. And what it did in the synagogue was it was basically used as my Torah cam. It was a computer that was connected to a webcam and to OBS, and transmitted through NDI wireless what the camera saw onto the production computer. This is the one we're not using anymore, but this is the kind of thing that it can do quite easily, even an old Nook. Our main computer is a more powerful Nook, and let me just see if I can show you that. This is not it. This is the one I have at home, but it is essentially a duplicate of that Nook. If you can see, my mouse is very small, but my hand, you can see how small it is. Mm-hmm. It's about double the size of the other Nook, but it is very powerful. It has a very powerful graphics GPU. It has 6 monitor outputs. It can support up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. And I can tell you, until now, we had absolutely no problems operating the equipment with it. So, and this one is called a Hades Canyon. They already have the next generation of that. This is the 8th generation. There is already 11th generation, which is even more powerful. So the reason I went for that and not for a desktop, this is essentially a desktop, and you can upgrade the hard drive, you can upgrade the memory, but not much more than that. The processor and the GPU are soldered in, you can't change them. The reason I chose that was because I wanted something that could easily be moved around, something that can be portable. As it happened, we never moved the computer in the synagogue. We were planning to do so, high holidays and so on. That didn't happen. But the one I have here is definitely one that travels around when I need to. So all in all, it does a fantastic job. Tobias is.
Yeah.
So, Carmi.
What's the price point on those machines?
So the price on this machine that you just saw, I have to tell you, everything is up in the air at the moment because the whole of the processor industry is up in the air. And processors and GPUs are going to go up in price. This is my understanding of so whatever I tell you now is only based on my experience as it was, but I know there are problems there. So this one, I deliberately bought the older model and I configured it myself, and it cost me £800. Somebody can translate into dollars if you can. I think about $1,000.
No, generally the typical translation of tech in UK prices to dollars is you take the price in pounds and you just say that's the price in dollars. We usually get it for about the same price as what you pay for it in pounds, but in dollars. Sometimes it's even cheaper.
So the base unit cost me around the 500 mark or 600 mark, and then of course adding memory and adding hard drive, and obviously the sky's the limit as to how much capacity you want and so on. This one and the other one that I purchased, the other one was a little bit more expensive because I bought it earlier. That was about £1,000. Nowadays, I think if you go for the newer model, you're looking at £1,200 to £1,400.
Tobias,
what OBS functions are you taking advantage of?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
What is happening on OBS using that machine?
So basically, all cameras are NDI cameras. So and we have a switch. So all three cameras come to the OBS, and we transmit. Basically, what people see on Zoom is what comes out of OBS.
But do you have OBS running on multiple machines?
We used to, only when we had the Torah cam running from a separate computer. So that computer sent the NDI signal into the other OBS. Otherwise, no, we're not using multiple OBS. It's just the one OBS that sends the picture, not the sound, but the picture to.
OBS is kind of your switcher.
Yeah, pretty much. And we sometimes during the service we put pictures through it, or of our sanctuary or other things. It's the switcher basically.
And in your current setup, OBS is being powered by one of these Nooks, or it's being powered by a bigger machine?
No, it's Hades Canyon Nook, the one I just showed you, the larger of the two, of course. That one has quite a I can't remember what the GPU in it. I think it's AMD. It's the one and only AMD installed into an Intel machine, which is a bit of a problem actually. I have to tell you, until now, there was absolutely no problem in terms of capacity. That machine never, as far as I'm aware, never reached capacity. And if we had failures in the system, that did not come from the machine.
Thanks.
So there's also another make, the B-Link, are very similar. Did you ever try those, Yuval, at all, or have you always stayed with the NUCs?
No, I always stayed with the Nooks, and they're the ones I started, as I said, fourth generation and went up. No, I was, I'm very impressed with the quality of the Nooks. But the things to remember: this Nook has a 65 watts power intake, and I think there is another one which has 100 watts. That's a little bit more powerful. But these smaller Nooks will have 25, 28 watts. Those who understand about computers know that it is not very high power.
Quickly,
Joanne,
where is the Nook manufactured?
You got me now. I have no idea.
Okay.
I do not have any.
Parts are probably made somewhere else, but I just wanted to know who's putting it all together.
It's an Intel venture. I have no idea.
Okay.
It's a good question. I don't have the answer. It's made in China. This one is made in China. Okay.
I think everything everywhere is somewhere along the line, isn't it? That's really, really. I like hearing about some of these things. They're the use of these work, and it's great to see you put them into practice and delivering your setup with there. I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we've had here. So again, please, everybody, the questions are here in the chat. And also, I'd like to just say to Brett, welcome to Brett, who's joined us on the panel today. I know I think Sunday turned into, unfortunately, funeral day for you, Brett. Is
Lots
that
of
roughly?
Death. Sundays are death days these days.
Yeah. But I don't think this wasn't was this a stone setting?
This was an unveiling, so happier than
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got a question in here from Carmi. The top question in here, Carmi. I wonder if you can read have you got it to hand?
Sure. Do people expect to continue this level of productions once things open up? I mean, some shows didn't have any streaming and have moved to what we're seeing, and some had like a single camera streaming out. But once you move to have open in-person services again, do you expect to continue this level of production, or do you expect to scale back to what you had before?
Richard, we'll start with you on that one.
So I would say this is one of those things where we can't put the genie back in the bottle. And I think from my perspective, I think that the community has got used to the ability of being able to choose whether or not they want to come in person. At the moment, many are choosing not to. But I think people may choose for all sorts of reasons, and especially if you've got events like the mitzvah happening, you've got family abroad. It's something. Why wouldn't you continue it? Because actually it makes your service more accessible. Saying that, I do know some communities. I know there's, I think it was Newcastle Reform, said that they had actually decided on next Shabbat they were going next Shabbat. In theory, all the restrictions are coming off in the UK in a fortnight's time, or who knows. But they were going to actually go and stop doing anything online at that point, and they were going to go back to doing in-person services only. But that's one of the few communities I know. But there's a very real debate about in-person versus hybrid and going on, but I personally think we're here. This is here to stay for the long term.
I think this is a really interesting question. Other ones who on the panel, your thoughts of this? Yuval.
So I think things will change, definitely. So they will not stay the way they are now, and they will not be going back to how they were before. And what we will see is maybe some services will be more like they were before, and other services will be more how they are now. So there will be more variety of, and basically now we know it can happen. we could decide that, for example, that this Friday night service, it will be a Zoom service rather than coming together in person. So I believe there will be a change. It will not stay the same. It will not go back to how it was.
Tobias or Brett?
Yeah, I agree with you, Val. I think it's now just we have this expanded palette of options. And so just like you used to say, should this event have food? No, it doesn't need it, or it just needs snacks. Same with this, we'll say, is this event best only Zoom, only Sanctuary, hybrid, or multi-access? And I think we'll adjust to, if it turns out, right, that 90% have come back into the Sanctuary and there's only a few people on Zoom, which I would be surprised by, but if that's how the people behaved, then I think you have a good reason to limit how much of the production you're doing. But I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Brett, where do you see this on your side?
I think it's really complicated. Right. So Carmi asked the question about this level of production. And I think it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle, especially, right? The going from having that looks something that looks very professional to having something that very much does not look professional and doesn't sound professional. People have come to expect it, but there's also like a lot of people who are not comfortable still with the idea of things being online and not being in person at all, right? So the option of let's have a Zoom service tonight, many people still have very strong feelings about how that looks for a synagogue that owns a building and how people can, whether they're going to forget or to come, whether they're going to forget the building exists, whether they're going to only want a virtual experience. And that's terrifying in a lot of ways. It's also really exciting, but terrifying. So I think this level of production is here to stay. But I also think a lot of congregations are going to have a lot of very difficult conversations sometime soon.
Joanne?
I agree with everything everyone said. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle. If people know that we have this level of production, it should kind of be the expected standard. In the Unitarian Universalist world in the United States, there are many congregations that also broadcast to YouTube and Facebook. So, Yuval, if you're only broadcasting to Zoom, that's a different level. So they're used to now putting their services out to the world, have the world have access to that. And each congregation is going to have to make a decision as to whether or not they want to kind of continue that level of engagement with the world, or whether they'd like to become a little bit more insular. But it's definitely going to be per congregation, I would imagine.
Yeah, go back to Tobias. Then I want to have a quick conversation, comment on it, and then we'll go back to Carmi. So Tobias first.
We had our board, our temple annual meeting this past Friday evening, starting an hour before services, and we still have no one coming into the sanctuary for the next 2 weeks. So it's fully virtual, but and then the service also was just pushing out from the synagogue. And I think especially in Minneapolis, for example, where the winters are freezing and a board, well, now we're in the summer, but many different functions, I think people will embrace the convenience moving forward. And, they were comfortable voting on annual budget or whatever on Zoom, and they probably couldn't imagine that a year ago. So I think that's a new step too.
So I really like this question. In particular, I like the way you asked it about the fact about the tech. In other words, and I'm not trying to push tech into the front of this, it's the level of production. I think this has, and everybody said it's litter, we've opened this up and people are now going, yeah, okay, we can do this. However, I drive a car and I've just gone and bought myself a bicycle. In other words, I'm going back to technology that didn't exist, or shouldn't, and that all of this. And I think there is needs for everything. And I think, as you said, really, Tobias, an AGM doesn't actually really need to be in person. In fact, AGMs are one of those things that those sort of general meetings they don't work really well. Certain services, yes, I think they actually work much, much better in person, and there's a better feeling. But there's also certain feelings that you find and emotional experiences and the connections with people that just can't get in the room. And I just hope we don't lose those things. Richard, very quickly, and then I said I'll go back to Carmi.
I was going to say, I think it's, go back to, I think what Tobias was saying is that it'll be one of those things that you'll vary your services. You may say, well, we do, I don't know, it's Tisha B'Av, and we're going to do one in-person event, and we're going to do one online event or one hybrid event, and you'll mix it. You'll just mix and match the whole thing up a lot more, and just work out what's appropriate for the occasion. And it's just going to become the tool in the army.
I would say on that the overnight Shavuot service, the overnight Shavuot learning that Yuval was involved in, it never would have worked in person to the level of success that was, of being able to bring people from around the country till 3-4 o'clock in the morning because they didn't have to drive home. To Carmi, I said go back to you.
Yeah, so I guess I said the level of production, I was not talking about necessarily the quality level. I assume that, you already have better mics and you have better cameras and you have better stuff. It was more for me the thought of having 12 cameras and having all of the stuff and doing all of that kind of production. My big concern is, like, when the more you have split the congregation, right, that some people will go in person on one day and some people will go on a different day, it means you don't end up getting that critical mass for a service. So I'm perfectly fine with the idea that some services will be virtual and some services will be in person. My concern is that if you don't have some that are exclusively in person, then you won't ever build that community back. And I just, again, people have different views on this, but I feel that from my perspective, that there is something different. Like even the little breakout rooms that people do in Zoom for, after services and stuff, it's not the same as being able to walk up to someone and chat with them, or see somebody standing there that you don't really know and go talk to them, and just a different kind of thing. And that's my big concern, is that if it moves to always being hybrid, you will lose that, and eventually that will become a real problem. That's my take.
I think anybody would, I hope, around here would say similar things. It's not, this isn't a replacement. This isn't like, and also I think everything is never binary. It's like, you can't say, and we'll only ever do this. In fact, what worries me is the synagogues who have not embraced this at all, who are expecting 100% for it to go back to how it was a year and a half ago. And I think they're just going to wake up and find, like we did in the UK when technology moved on and things like the coal mines closed, etc. The technology moves on and things move on and requirements move on. And if you don't adopt it or don't embrace it, even what you thought was a good thing eventually becomes outdated and lost. Okay, I think we covered that question. I'm going to move on to the next one. Does the Google Nest Hub Mini also function the same way as the Facebook portal and show and increase the quality of Zoom meetings? I'm pretty sure it does. The reason I'm sure of this is that what actually it's doing is it's acting as it's acting as a Zoom room. And the way you can actually tell is if you look on the right hand side under the panelist list, when one of these devices join, if it has three little faces instead of the name, so we are all on the right hand side, you can see the little different colors, names of people, they're 2 letters on a meeting, not necessarily on a webinar. If it joins and it shows 3 little faces, it's like a little then that's how it works. Tobias, next question, I'm just going to read it out. What would you put on a stream Zoom cart to move from chapel to classroom to boardroom? Anybody?
Are you talking about putting a screen on wheels?
Tobias, do you want to explain?
Not concerned as much about the screen, more of the cameras, mics, streaming software or hardware.
Yeah, I think if you're moving that, say you move that 65-inch that he has on a cart from a sanctuary to a classroom, then you have to reconnect the audio. What system is that classroom using for the audio? That would be problematic, number one. Number two, I don't even know if there was a webcam on top of that screen. Um, the webcam could probably transfer quicker than the audio could. I would.
There's no webcam on top of the screen, but there is a PTZ cam above it, which we can use if we wish to. So, but it's not really movable as easily.
Right. I think classrooms are that's a different animal. It's a different set of circumstances. Needs a different solution. From classroom to classroom, sure, you can put something on a cart, but you have to kind of address the classroom need and the boardroom smaller need of the camera and the audio and the visual and the screen all working together first before I would move it from the sanctuary to a classroom, if that makes any sense.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yuval, and then Richard.
So one of my dreams, if you want, and this is what I have at home at the moment, I showed you my Nook and the cameras that I have around. It's essentially a semi-mobile system. And for some time, I've been thinking, I wish I could sort of have it all in one place that I can cart around. In which case, I think you need very little. I don't think you can move it within the sanctuary and so on, but definitely you can have a system that is mobile enough to have most equipment. The screen is one of the bigger problems, because you need a large screen will not fit into a small suitcase. But otherwise, all other parts of the system could just be integrated into one. If it's a sound mixer, if it's the computer and the camera, that it can easily lay around when you need to. And this is exactly what I do with the equipment I have at home.
You're muted.
I'm muted. Richard.
So this is exactly, funny enough, what we've done at Sharet Tzedek. We went and bought ourselves a very nice 85-inch interactive whiteboard, which is one of the reasons I was asking about a trolley. Is that we bought it on a trolley specifically for moving, and it's a powered trolley, so it goes up and down as you need it to make it work in different locations. It has a camera on board, and the other thing we paid for when we bought the interactive white screen, which is basically a great big Android tablet, is it had the option to go and have a PC slotted into the side of it, which is what we have. So it's used by our kindergarten and other people during the week, and they can put up their YouTube, and there's some software called Octopus, which you use for interactive learning and lesson plans and all that sort of stuff, and a variety of pens, which I know have dangerous knowledge about. You can turn up to it with any device you like, and it will go and throw your phone or your tablet, and you can put it on the screen share technology. But fundamentally, at the back of it, we've got our desktop, we've got our Windows PC, which we then just wire into the sound system when we need to, and there's a camera sitting on the top, and we just move it from whatever port is needed to make it to work. We can operate it in the Android mode. There's the Android Zoom interface, which works for simple stuff, and when we want to do our more complicated stuff, we switch it into the PC mode, and off we go, and that all connects up to everything else we're doing, and it works really well. You just need to remember to lower it before you try and put it through the door.
So this is an example of one that we put together. A couple of these we put together for one synagogue in London. And what you've got on here is they've got a PC. At the top, you've obviously got a PC, which they can see. So the PC is sitting here. Underneath it, you've got an A10 Mini, which is sitting underneath there. Then they've got sitting beneath that is it's actually at the back is the XR18, the same audio rack, the same audio system that Yuval has got. And then finally at the bottom, you've got 3 radio mics, and they connect that all in with 2 cameras that they just plug in really nice. they can wheel this around. They wheel this around to the various different places in the synagogue where they need, because they've got 3 different rooms that they do services from. Joanne, your hand was first, and then Tobias.
How do they hear? How do you monitor?
So they've got it coming out back in. They put headphones out of the XR18, and then they plug it into a TV, and they use the TV for the Zoom elements, and they just broadcast the audio out that way from the TV.
Okay.
Use the TV as a monitor come feedback. Tobias?
Do you know if they use it with just one camera on the speakers, or do they set up multiple cameras?
They got 2 cameras, and what we actually did is we put 2 cameras on a tripod, and the tripod has got an arm to have a second camera. The 2 pretty lightweight cameras, and that is enough for them to switch between the 2. They have 3 connections on the A10 Mini. The 2 cameras, and the third connection is going to be for liturgy and things like that. But it's not they're not doing multi cameras on there. Right? Sorry, Tobias.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and if I was going to do that as a hybrid meeting, that it could be great to have another Nook running another camera, and so that way it's just two different Zoom boxes, and people can choose if they want to see the speaker or the group or what have you.
It works out really well for them. Brett, did you have a question? And then I've got Joanne.
It's a question, I guess. Has anyone used the all-in-one solutions that are available? I keep seeing them, but I haven't tried one, because that seems like it would be a really good fit for like a classroom setting or a boardroom.
So when you mean by the all-in-ones,
like the neat bar?
So like Logitech makes a camera with a built-in Bluetooth speaker, right? And they make them with integrated microphones, and then the option of adding a microphone. But rather than using a wireless system for microphones and multiple cameras, especially like depending on the age of the kids, it seems like that might be a good solution. I just don't know how good they are.
So I've used them. I've used the Owl, which is the one with the I think it's 4 cameras on the roof, and so it can give you. It just moves to the relevant person. Yuval talked about the Facebook portal. The Facebook portal has got a TV. It's got a brother, the TV, which is both of those at the moment are on special price of about £100. Stroke, as Carmi says, it's £100 or $100. It's the same price. And there is there's what's the one that everybody talks about that's been doing a lot of pushing for at the moment. Someone mentioned it earlier. Neat. That is significantly more expensive. I've used a few of these, and they're okay for meetings. They're designed for meetings in meeting rooms with about 8 people, and one person talking. Where they're going to struggle is if you're trying to use them for services. And everybody who's tried to use them, and there is a Facebook group for Facebook's group for worship, and people have tried it, and the Zoom group for worship, and they just don't make it to that level. So
that's exactly what I was going to say, that your solution in your cart is a wonderful solution for the sanctuary. I think the solution for the boardroom / classroom is different. It's a lesser, you don't need all of that. You don't need to switch between 3 cameras in a classroom, right? It's a smaller solution. So I think the Owl is like around $3,000. Am I right? That's a big investment and if the audio is no good, that's what I want to know. I want to know, how does it sound and how does it hear?
I think so. If you had asked me what's good audio 18 months ago for Zoom,
you'd have a different idea.
I would have gone, well, I'm just used to this. I was using boundary microphones on a desk. So when we would have a meeting, and I put 3 boundary microphones, which are like those flat pod things that go there, or we always remember like the starfish shaped microphone you put in the room, and you think, oh, it sounded great. It's like, because that was all you were used to. So now I would say that everybody's experience and expectation has been raised. Not for everybody, but I think for where a lot of people are going. The people who are on this call who are looking to move it forward will find, I think, some of those things disappointing. Okay. Moving on, we've got
Carmi's got a hand up.
Sorry, Carmi, I missed that.
No problem. So the Neat is about $2,500, and it's pretty cool. I played with it a little bit. The problem is it's $2,500, and it is, if it is exactly what you want at exactly that moment, is perfect. It does a whole bunch of nice things where it separates individual users. So if, again, it's interesting for meetings. It's not interesting for a classroom, too many people, but in a meeting, it can pull out the individual people and then it puts them into their own little boxes. So if you have a meeting where some people are in the room and some people are not, it makes it so that everybody is feels like they're the same, which is a really nice thing. But again, it's expensive and it's pretty limited. You still need to have a display. The problem with all of the sort of all-in-one solutions is they're great at the moment. This is like any hardware solution. They're great at the moment you get them. And the concern I have with like that one as an example is, the Logitech one I expect to be around, but Dolby has one and Dolby's dropped it from the market. And Dolby is a huge company. So anyone that's, even if they're at that level, have decided it's not worth it, you always have to worry about support long-term. Whereas if you have individuals, if you have cameras, they're cameras, and you can always move them to a different solution, even if the software you were using for the streaming thing changed, you can still do something.
And I would even expand on that and say that it's not, an all-in-one solution is a misnomer because you also need other things. It's not everything. It doesn't include the screen, for one thing. You know what I mean? Like, so there's something else to add to that $3,000 price tag anyway. So why not?
And I think even if you take the example that Yuval was giving us earlier of how he put all that together, the missing element in all of these is the human beings. You need somebody to operate it. You need somebody. You need a rabbi that's relevant to know how to work in that environment and to deliver it. So
one person once said to me that an install isn't a successful install if you can't just walk into the room and operate without having to read a manual. But that's
exactly
the end goal was to have.
And in fact, although it's a very last minute question that's just come in, because I'm going to get to the other ones. I think the question that Richard, if you could just read out your question you just put in.
Yes, it was when you move to the hybrid era, which we've done. How do you stop that or ensure that the congregation doesn't basically turn into your studio audience?
Well, I think. So the example I'm going to give, and I'll go to you straight after Carmi. The example I'm going to give is that when PowerPoint came out and clip art came out in the 90s, everybody tried to get as many pieces of clip art onto one piece of paper as they could, and the fonts were just horrendous and everything was a disaster. But we learned, and I think what we've got to bear in mind is that in going to what we're going to do, we will learn what is good and what's bad. But the only way you learn what's bad is by doing bad. And I think that's the thing. So we're just going to have to learn what works, what doesn't work, what moves forward, what doesn't move forward. I'm going to go to Carmi and then I'm going to go to JLo.
So my first answer would be, don't give up prizes. But my second answer would be, you need to, if you have a hybrid audience, you need to make sure that if you are calling for things, for participation from people in the building, then you also need to specifically call for, honors. While you might not be able to say somebody on Zoom can do Hagba, you do need to have a mix and understand that you're calling for that. And it means that you also need to make sure that the rabbi or whoever is doing something is also looking at what would be the congregation on Zoom or wherever. So it's not, if you don't have that, if you don't have them able to look at a camera that is really the audience surrogate, you will have that where they're the people that are there, and the remotes are second class.
So I think, Yuval, you talked about it earlier when you were saying that you gave some of the mitzvahs out to remotes as well. When I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I showed the example of Swezers and Sue and her services there, and they do mix it up. I think that's absolutely right. The thoughts of people at home doing Hanukkah. Do you hold the screen up and walk around until the cables break? That was the the thought I had. Sorry, J-Lo.
I'm probably just going to kind of repeat what you all said, which is I would it's the call to the worship leaders, the people who are designing worship need to be sure that they're including the people that are online, whether they're speaking for some part of the service, whether they're singing for some part of the service. They're the ones who have to, whoever's designing the worship service has to include everyone, and then maybe they won't feel like such second.
But Richard's question was the other
way.
half.
It's actually the other way around. Actually, it's not so much the problem with the people online feeling they feel very connected, but it's the people sitting in the sanctuary feeling that actually what is their role there, and almost sitting there like feeling their.
Do you know that
it's the same thing though. It's the worship leader. Well, the person designing the worship is the one that's going to have to bring in all the pieces, I would imagine.
And I think what makes it super hard at the moment for us in the UK is that the people in the room are not allowed to sing.
And they've all got to wear masks.
They've all got to wear masks. So they almost end up looking like the silent witnesses of a service that's being produced for people at home. It's a bit of a strange experience.
Better than permanent
we're
silence.
getting close. We're running out of time.
Is that changing soon, or is that is that still you have no?
I don't think. I think it's not the time. We don't know.
We don't know.
We're supposed to find out tomorrow, but we shall see. We'll see. We're drifting into politics. We're doing well in just staying in religion. Let's not get into politics as well. A next question in from Tobias. Good that we're getting back in our sanctuaries. Having said that, anyone identify programs or services that will intentionally remain virtual or Zoom only? So I'll start with this, and that's the Shavuot overnight learning, and that I really hope that's going to stay. It was just Yuval. You're a key member of organising that for Liberal Judaism. Comments?
Yeah, I want to say that I did think about it because you start as soon as you start thinking about next year, and we don't know what will happen with the COVID-19 next year. We all thought we knew it last year, but we had surprises. Assuming that things are going to maybe edge towards normal, I would say that my thought was that the best way to do it will be to actually have the services communal, as in within the community, but then join for the teaching online. And that really had a big power, the services as well. But it's the teaching, and in fact, the teaching generally, I would say, have that slightly more power online than they have in person. So I'm thinking about the proselyte course that even if things are improving, I'm going to carry on. Maybe once a term we'll meet, and the rest of the time we'll do it online. It's much more convenient for people. We can share resources much easier. And it's also a slightly different learning style that is.
And I'd also say, without anybody who's going through that process, it can be quite. I can imagine it can be a very nervous process at the beginning, and being able to start that process online, outside of the room, being able to just dip your toe in before you're sort of there.
Not only that, but we have people who are disabled and live too far, and
Mm.
suddenly we are enabling something that we just didn't have in the past. So I think teaching teaching will carry on.
We're running out of time, so I'm just going to go to Tobias quickly and then Richard on this.
I think one program we've identified is our Hanukkah candle lighting, which we did 8 nights on Zoom, each night with a different clergy, having a slightly different 30-minute candle lighting. And we would never get people to travel to the temple in midwinter in Minneapolis for just a 20-minute program. But you throw a deploying the program out virtually, and it can be really effective.
Richard? And by the way, that was exactly the one I was going to cover as well.
So I was going to say, Tobias, you stole my thunder. I was going to raise that one as well. The other thing we did is we've done co-services, but unlike where you normally do joint services, and one community goes to the other, and the one who travels, you always lose them. We've done them online, like we did a service with a community down in Surrey, which is about 70 miles from us, but we could do it as equals, and that was absolutely fantastic. What I would say, the other thing, which I think the converse of that is stuff which will go back to in person, I think, is things like family programming and kids, because I think that's the bit which is really hard to do online, and I think that's the thing which is going to go back in person really rapidly.
I will tell you, if you want to see something brilliantly done online, and of course I will be talking about this, if you see the Tot Shabbat at my synagogue at the Ark, in particular the one, not this Shabbat before, when the dinosaur came for Shabbat, and the dinosaur turned up, and it is memorable. It was absolutely memorable, and the kids loved it. So it has been very, very good, because also you get them to interact with it. As long as you're interactive with them, it's a certain age. I think that's where, Richard, I think if you're dealing with that younger, the really young age, and parents don't necessarily, because you know what it's like. You bring your 4-year-old to a service and you're like, are they going to behave long enough, or am I going to be spending most of the time with an argument outside?
For me, it's something about, you can see the need of the young people and the families, and also there's some mental health issues there and other things. And actually, families and the kids actually need that in-person contact, and that's actually really, really, really important. Although we can do religion at school and we can deliver it really nicely, actually, those sorts of programs need to go back to in-person.
But programs. I think this is where we come down to that. The binary question is: does everything have to be? Do we have to do it one way, or do we have to do it the other way? Why can't we do some of it? Why can't we do it both? Okay, we're coming down to the very last things. Tobias, question: is there a simple way to restream or record a Zoom multi-spotlight view? I have an answer to this, but it's not simple. Brett.
When you say restream, you mean restream as in put it out again, or do you mean restream like simulcast it?
Simulcast.
There isn't. Yeah, go on. Leo.
So as we're doing today, where we're sending out to 9 locations, do you mean that? Or...
Yeah. So for us who are in the Zoom, right, I could spotlight Leo and I can spotlight the Slido and have it 2 up. But the recording and Facebook Live will still only be Leo.
Okay. So the answer to that, now I understand the question, is I actually have a machine on Amazon Web Services where I screen scrape Zoom and I send it out that way. And then you get the high definition, you get the full 1080p high definition, which you can't get out of this. And I do it the other way around. I send StreamYard into Zoom for Zoom watch parties. This is coming along. There is going to be a lot of movement in this direction in the future, but this is probably way beyond here. This is an office hours conversation, and if anybody doesn't know what I mean, there's a show called Alex Lindsay runs a show every single day called Office Hours. They are now doing that for their second half of their show every single day. UK 3 p.m. West Coast 6 a.m. I think is right, if I remember right.
Yep, 10 a.m. on the East.
7 a.m. is when the show actually starts. 6 a.m. is the earliest part, but 7 to 9 California time. So 10 to
it's beyond
whatever.
We share a lot of things with what they do, but that question probably sits more with them. Coming on to the last, I think they're both comments rather than questions. From David Eppinger, live always allows interaction and the ability to embrace the true facial and body expressions of the congregants. Zoom is a good second place. I think that really sums it up in a lot of ways. I think Zoom wins in certain things, but, and it's like a big but, it was never, you know, if anybody thinks this is a replacement for meeting people, it just doesn't, it isn't. And that, you know, it's just an alternative rather than a replacement. Anybody else, any comments on that before I go on? And then finally, the last thing is, as a worship chair and a Zoom meister of my Reformed Synagogue, we're planning to keep pushing out Zoom services in order to connect to those that cannot make it. I've heard this comment many, many times. Yuval, you said that you're already moved 2 sessions aren't streamed. Do you have any thoughts of what your number of live versus in person? Do you think you'll end up with some that are never streamed and are not even on Zoom? Do you think there'll be that sort of thing?
Yeah, and it did happen. So what happens is that recently, when we talk, for example, about Israel or sensitive issues, my sermon, or I wanted, for example, to hold a discussion, not necessarily about sensitive things. I just wanted a discussion rather than a sermon. And I didn't want people to have that fear of, you know, we don't want to be on camera and so on. I actually switched off the streaming and said, for this sermon slot, there will be no streaming.
But my question, and maybe I didn't phrase it very well. Do you see yourself that you will have 3 different tiers, that you'll have just in person and Zoom, and in-person Zoom and streaming? Do you think there will be things that will have just in person in the future?
I personally hope not, but I don't know. And the main reason I'm saying I hope not is because I recognize that there are quite a few of our members who, you know, might be ill or might not be driving at night, for all sorts of reasons, would like to join the service but would not be able to attend. And I would love to accommodate for them. Maybe their experience will not be the same as sitting in the congregation, because the congregation there will be receiving the attention. But I think they will still appreciate being there, being a part of what we're doing.
I think that's a really nice place to wrap it up, Yuval. You've given us the journey of how far you've gone, where you've got to and here, and sort of an insight of where you're going in the future. I think it's amazing for everybody, for all of the people here who are running services, who are running things. This is a journey you set on a journey where you really don't know where you're actually aiming at. And we are moving and we're learning as we go along on this journey. And I'd like to thank the panel that are here today with me. So I'd like to thank Yuval, Richard, Joanne, Carmi, Brett, and Tobias in their sharing their knowledge and their experience. We've got another couple of sessions, and then we have our end of season event, which is being run by David Paskin, which is a 6+ hour long session where we're going to be having lots and lots of people talking about various things. So I'd like to thank you all for joining today. We're going to turn off the live stream. For those that are in Zoom, we're going to enable you to be able to join us. So thank you again. Tobias, if you can press the stop, as I think I can't do it.
Recording stopped.
And the live stream.